said was, we take science and we apply it to the art of business, and we help clients solve their toughest problems. That's still very true. We still help our clients with tough problems. But increasingly what we're focused on is helping them not just solve a problem, but achieve an improvement in performance. And so we have, over the years, built up a set of capabilities that allow us to really help our clients as they think about the future, how their business needs to change, take on that change, and over time transform themselves. And that's what we do.
And how in the world did you get into it?
Oh, accidentally is the honest answer. I did grow up in Glasgow. I went to Glasgow University, best university in the world, I think. I was president of the student union, and that meant we ran the largest bar in Glasgow. And I was clearing out the bar. And sitting on there was a recruiting brochure for McKinsey. And I thought, that sounds interesting. So I sent off a letter, and I said, look, I'm a law student at Glasgow University. I'm interested in applying to McKinsey. And I got a very nice note back that essentially said that we don't hire from Glasgow University. We hire from Oxford, we hire from Cambridge, but my father's Scottish, and I'd be happy to speak with you. And why don't you come down to London? So I got a free trip to London, met with 3 or 4 people, thought it was quite interesting. And so they sent me the letter with the offer, and I showed it to my parents, and they looked at the number and they thought, you should take that job. So I did. So I'd love to tell you I'd always wanted to be a management consultant, but that would just not be true.
One of the things that McKinsey does a lot of is try to figure out the future of the workforce. How do you see the workforce evolving over the next 10 years?
Well, the change that's happening has got many features to it, but the biggest feature is, of course, technology. Technology is changing the way work's done. We have a statistic that 60% of the jobs will see more than 30% of the tasks completely change. And that means everyone's going to face, and I say everyone, not everyone, but nearly everyone's going to face real change. As a result, it means the workforce has to be reskilled or skilled to take technology and make the most of it. That's a pretty profound change. And what is happening, I think, therefore, is there is good associated with that. It's a bit of I think it is an industrial revolution. I think we're seeing a real pace of change and scale of change. And ultimately, more jobs will be created. But the real issue is what happens in this transition. How do we ensure that people get the skills they need to succeed? So we're going to see a workforce that's going to put more emphasis on knowledge, more emphasis on services, more emphasis on really being able to make the most of capabilities that allow you to get the work done in different ways than today. That's a big shift. But I'm an optimist. I think there is a way through this. I think it requires real investment in jobs and training and education. But if that's done, again, there will be more work, not less work, when this is all finished.
So what do we do about growing inequality that has come with the globalization and technology?
Well, I think we have to remind ourselves that the nature of inequality is not straightforward. Why do I say that? There are 1.2 billion people who've actually been taken out of poverty in recent years. So the inequality between countries is actually narrowed. The developing world is catching up. However, within countries, inequality is growing. It is growing. And to address that, I think there's a lot of change that is going to have to be embraced. One is a rethinking of education itself to ensure that it's actually able to deliver the skills to cope with new technologies. And that's not happening fast enough. Secondly, I think there also needs to be a hard look at the way in which healthcare and the cost of education have risen far faster than any other costs when it comes to housing and employment. And of course, that's a big issue. So how do you get those costs and look at them and think about the way in which you can ensure provision of basic healthcare and education to keep that inequality gap from getting to really hurt. So there's a number of places where I think we actually need to look hard at the way in which globalization is working in order to allow it to do what it does do well, which is actually promote and narrow the gap between countries. But within countries, it's a real issue.
McKinsey's been lambasted recently, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times in particular, New Yorker, for so many different things. If you don't mind, let's go through some of them, starting with Purdue Pharma, which did the opioids. And you were a consultant there, McKinsey was, and sort of gave them advice on how to turbocharge, and I think that was the word used, the selling of opioids. Was that a mistake?
One of the things we've decided is we're not going to do any more work in opioids. We've made that decision. And any work we do in opioids is 100% focused now on alleviating the crisis. It's clearly a crisis that hits communities across the country and beyond. And in that context, of course, we want to be on the right side where we're helping solve the crisis, not create the crisis. That's what we're focused on.
So why did you get involved in opioids?
You know, it's many years ago, and I think at that point in time, the way in which people saw the problem is different than the way in which we see it now. And when we see it now, it's a crisis. It's a situation where there are so many things that need to happen. The business community needs to be involved, social care and provision needs to be involved, healthcare. I want us to be involved in making a positive contribution to the opioid crisis that's now existing.
So how are you going to do that?
Well, one of the things we've already been doing is we've invested a lot in really having a look at how do you bring people together to address this crisis. And if you look, you'll see we've written quite extensively the way in which different parties are going to have to pool their resources, their science, their business understanding, their understanding of the different options there are to treat pain, which is one of the reasons these opioids were originally on the market, are on the market. All of that has to happen, and the healthcare system has to work together. So we have a lot to say about how that can be brought to a place in which the communities work together to solve this terrible crisis.
Another one is the Saudis and your relationship with the Saudis, and especially something that kind of leaked. It was an internal document, but it talked about some of the dissidents on Twitter, and then they end up getting arrested by the Saudi government. Was there a mistake that was made in there, or what should you have done differently?
I think there are many mistakes in that situation, but let me be crystal clear. Trying to draw a cause and effect in that, I think, is very hard. There was an internal document. It was to demonstrate how to use analytical techniques to assess the impact of different marketing techniques, and they happened to use a response to a government policy as the way to do just that. But in doing so, they identified, as you said, but they didn't identify, they actually just looked at three people who were very prominent, 800,000 followers. They weren't difficult to spot. So I think it's very hard to draw cause and effect. That said, of course I regret that. I said at the time I was horrified. I repeat that. And I am horrified. But I think on Saudi, I want to just be clear. We do a lot of very important and good work in that country. It's not in the world's interest that Saudi Arabia destabled or unstable. And one of the things that I'm proud of is we have 400 or 500 people there, about a third of them are female. We're one of the biggest employers of women in that country. That's a good thing. Youth unemployment in Saudi Arabia is 25%. Again, it's not good if those people don't have jobs to go to. So I'm actually quite proud of the work we do in Saudi Arabia, and we are not engaging in work that really, I think, touches on some of the issues that are more problematic about that country.
Well, you have Mohammed bin Salman sort of implicated in the death of the journalist Khashoggi. Are you having different ways of looking at what you will do for the Saudis now that it's become so much more controversial?
I think one of the things we're doing, it's not just Saudi Arabia, we look very hard at how we think about different countries. And so we have, over actually the last couple of years, been looking again at the way in which we think about the activities in countries, and really try to draw some lines about where we will not work in defence, not work in policing, not work in interior. And it's not just Saudi Arabia where we made that decision, but it is important that we understand that there are countries in this world that are difficult. But let me also say this, 61% of the world, according to Freedom House, doesn't live in democracies.
Right.
And so we, I think, have to decide, do we engage with the 61% or do we not? I believe we should engage. But I also recognise that we should engage responsibly, and we've put in place and are working through a series of measures to keep focus on ensuring we're on the right side of those issues.
One of the things that people have pushed McKinsey on is a little bit more transparency.
Yeah.
And, hey, I've worked at companies where McKinsey was a consultant. We didn't want them going around, that was a timing, to say, hey, we're a client. And yet, this lack of transparency, it seems, has caused some trouble. Are you going to push a little bit more transparency as part of the values of McKinsey?
Yes, to some extent that's why I'm here.
That's right.
I don't think there are many global managing partners at McKinsey who've ever sat down and had these kind of conversations. So the short answer is yes. You've got to remind yourself, and I think we just touched on it, why we are less than transparent, in the sense that this was all grounded in a strong belief and reverence for client confidentiality, that do whatever it takes to protect the client. It was so pervasive that when I joined the firm back in 1989, one of the first things that I got told was, when you take a taxi to the client, make sure it drops you 2 blocks away from the client. That was good advice, except I grew up in Glasgow. The taxis in London, it just meant I got lost.
Right.
But it also meant you couldn't figure out where we were going. So I think times have changed. People want to know. We will still protect our client confidences. We still will. But we can be a bit more open about ourselves. We can actually meet with folk, let them see who we are. Because I think a lot of this is because of mystique. People don't really know, who are these McKinsey consultants? Are they strange sort of people that just have no emotion? Actually, we have a lot of emotion. And you'll find it's full of people who are the sons and daughters of educators, as I am. My father's an academic, my mother's a teacher. We're loaded with people like that who are actually choosing to do what we do because fundamentally we actually coach and help people succeed. That's what we do, and we don't seek the limelight. You know, it's not the place to be if you want to be in the limelight. If you want to have your photo up there and be celebrated as a great success, probably go to Wall Street. Don't come to McKinsey. And that's all part of this sort of, we're a bit introverted. So that has to evolve. I want us to be more open about who we are. I think we can be more open about the kind of people we have. We can be more open about the kind of work we do. But where it stops short is we still want to protect our clients' interests and put them ahead of our own.
Do you think that when it's a government as a client, and as you say, that's less than 10% of your business, I would guess, that in some ways you have to be more transparent and open and say, yes, this government or this government entity is a client of ours?
Well, you have to remember that with governments too, it's up to them to disclose what they think needs to be disclosed. What we have to do, of course, is comply with all the requirements associated with serving government. But it's for government to decide what they say or what don't say about any work they commission us to do. It's not for me to second guess that.
Yeah, but you could say it's probably a problem, as it turned out to be in South Africa, where you got sort of caught up in that, wasn't your bribery, but the whole bribery scandal that brought down Zuma, that if we're going to work for government, it's part of our internal rules that we have to be upfront about that.
Well, let's be careful because that was a state-owned enterprise, which actually is quite different from working directly for the South African government, just to be clear. And I think in that case,
the president was somewhat implicated in it.
Well, you know, the situation in South Africa, I'm not going to defend Jacob Zuma, so I'm not going there. So I'm going to agree with you and say absolutely he was. But it's a different situation from serving a true government. But what it meant was, and one of the first things I did is, when I came into this role, was I flew to South Africa, and I got up there and answered a lot of questions, and I said, we got some things badly wrong. Badly wrong. We partnered with the wrong people. We actually never began to work with them, but we were close to people we shouldn't have been close to. Secondly, the way in which we thought about the fees was just wrong. Shouldn't have been success fees.
Explain that to me. In other words, you were getting a fee based on, that could have gone up to hundreds of millions.
It could have been much higher.
Yeah.
And I think whilst the intent is to tie your success to the success of the work, I think in that context, it's not going to be a success.
So you're going to change your policies? How?
On that. Well, when it comes to that kind of government work, and I'll use your word terms to say it's government with SME work, that kind of work, we're not going to do that. We're going to cap any fee upside because we recognise that it's just not the kind of environment where you want to have those kind of fees in place.
You're a Scotsman living in Hong Kong.
Are you going to ask me about Scotland?
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about Scotland.
Yeah.
And Brexit, but also Scotland in the context of Europe.
Well, I'm a very proud Scot, and I care deeply about my country. I also happen to, over the years, at a personal level, believe that Scotland's place is in the United Kingdom. That's been the view I've had over many years. And so if you ask me personally what I think about my own views, that's where I am. But the complexity of Scotland's relationship with England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and let alone adding into that the European Union, where there's the whole question of could Scotland ever be admitted to the European Union, that's a question which people are wrestling with, is one that is firmly in political territory for the politicians to answer, because it's going to require an awful lot of political will and motivation to sort that through. All I care about is that Scotland does well in the future, and I do believe that no matter which path we take, the key to Scotland's future is actually an education system that has been the leader in the UK and that needs to continue, an environment in which entrepreneurship can thrive, that is the home of Adam Smith, and a beautiful country that I hope more and more people choose to visit. And all of that I'll be focused on. The politicians can sort out where the border gets drawn.
You mentioned Adam Smith, your fellow countryman. His theory of moral sentiments, I think, is one of your favorite books. Explain how that informs your thinking.
Well, one of the things that, of course, I don't think it's a tragedy at all, but Adam Smith is known for the invisible hand, and 1776, the Wealth of Nations. I think some other things happened that year that means some parts of the world cared about what was being written at the time. But in 1759, he was the professor of moral philosophy at Glasgow University, my university. And he wrote The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And in that book, he sets out what I think is actually still highly relevant to society as a whole. He wrote about the community interest. He wrote that the business person should not be separate and detached, but involved in the community. He wrote that the business person should be willing to sacrifice their little interest, and he called it their little interest, in the interest of the community as a whole. And that is from Scotland. You know, we are, I think, very much the fabric of the country is that people care about community, care about society. And so when I read things like the Business Roundtable statement, which I signed, I have those words in my head. Because while for some, they'll think the business of business is business, and I respect that was a view which was very prevalent as I was growing up, I don't hold that view. I hold Adam Smith's view, that the interests of the community, don't be separate and detached, be involved, think about the community, recognise the common interest. That's Adam Smith.
And so McKinsey and the Business Roundtable are part of this movement to say business is not just about return on shareholder value, but it's about being part of the larger community. Do you see that as being the wave of the future?
I do, because I also think it's good business. I mean, the trite phrase of doing good by doing well is true. I think if you look at this issue of short-termism, I think there's now plenty of evidence that says those who take a long-term view ultimately do better. And I think a long-term view inevitably leads you down a path that says crude metrics that just look at a few economic measures aren't going to tell you whether the health of your business is actually going to endure. And if the community is not doing well and society is not benefiting, ultimately you're not going to benefit either. So that's why I believe, and I absolutely feel quite strongly and passionately about this notion that business does have a part to play. But we should never think we're politicians. That's where you've got to understand, and when I don't answer a question because I say that's for the politicians, it's because I have a healthy regard for the reality that my vantage point is also the one that starts from the business angle.
Now, finally, to get back to Brexit, suppose McKinsey gets called in by a rump group of Parliament or something. Says, you know, this is a real mess. Show me the way out. What would you do to figure out how the United Kingdom could deal with the Brexit issue?
Well, I'd remind myself, and I'd remind the politicians that when you look at the United Kingdom, one of its great challenges is productivity. It has lagged Europe in terms of productivity for the last decade. And if you look at the United Kingdom and say, let's remind ourselves, what are the fundamental issues, whether you believe in Brexit or you don't believe in Brexit, that this country needs to solve? And you'd start with productivity, and you'd look at the various elements that Britain needs to address in order to ensure that it is the successful, thriving economy that we all want it to be, whichever side of that debate you're on.
Kevin Sneader, thank you so much for
Thank you,
joining us. Appreciate it.
Nice to meet you.
And Brexit's still such an intractable